Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining me today. This is Kathy and I'm back with another ice cream cone card for you. Today I thought I would do something a little bit different, something a little bit more, I guess it's kind of pop art-ish because the colors that I chose are really very bright. Anyway, I started by treating a piece of Canson watercolor cardstock with my anti-static powder bag because I was going to do some embossing. Next, I randomly stamped the ice cream cone using Versamark ink, and with Versamark ink it's kind of hard to see it on the white cardstock, so I was just kind of guessing where I was going to be stamping it, and then I coated it with detail embossing powder from Hero Arts and heat set that until all of the powder was melted. I did have a couple of areas where I overlapped the stamp, but I was able to kind of figure out where the colors were supposed to go when I actually started doing the coloring. After all of the powder was melted, I just jumped right in and started the coloring. And instead of using Copic markers today, I decided to use my Arteza real brush pens. I started out using a water brush and applying just a light layer of water directly to the watercolor cardstock before going in with my brush pens. And I realized pretty quickly that that was not going to work for me. I've mentioned in a previous video that sometimes I have a hard time using a water brush, and for this particular card I wanted the colors to be really blended and I wanted to be able to use probably a lot more water than I probably should or needed to. So I do end up switching to just a regular old paintbrush. The colors that I use will pop up on the screen for you. I'll also have them listed down below in the description, as well as over on my blog. Since the images are embossed, the ink from the real brush pens actually will resist the embossing powder, and that makes it pretty easy to stay within the lines. For the ice cream cone, I started out with my darkest and then went in with my lighter color and then just used more water to blend those two colors together. With that, I'm going to go ahead and play some music for you while I finish up the cone, and then I'll be back to go over how I did the ice cream. So today's flavor is going to be orange sherbet. So I took my orange real brush pen and pretty much just put lines down where the embossed lines were. I wanted those areas to be the darkest. Next, I came in with the wrong color, and I didn't realize it until after I started blending the two together. But one of the things that I do love about these real brush pens is that they are really very forgiving. So as I continue and add in more orange and blend more of it out, I thought, wow, that looks a lot more yellow than I thought it would. And it was at that point that I realized I used the wrong color. Then I pick up the correct color, which is peach, and just add that into the ice cream. And I do go in a little bit later with just clean water on that first ice cream part and pick up some of the color and then go back in with the peach to make it look more of an orange sherbet color. With that, I'm going to play a little bit more music for you while I finish up the ice cream part, and I'll be back to go over how I colored in the whipped cream and the cherry. To color in the cherry, I used basically the same technique. I put my darker color down first and then added a little bit of the lighter color, and then used a wet paintbrush to blend the two colors together. What I like to do is put water where there is no pigment and kind of pull the water into the pigment. I seem to get a better blend by doing it that way. For the whipped cream, I really wasn't sure what colors I was going to use for that because I wanted it to look white, but the brown tones that I have in the set of 48 of the Real Brush pens, I didn't think that I'd be able to get them light enough, so in the end I ended up using a gray and a blue, and I was really happy with how they turned out. It does end up looking a lot more white, especially when I add in the background, which adding in that background color, yeah, I had some issues there too, but we'll get to that soon. So this is the first attempt at the background on this card, and I do have this part sped up a lot, but I wanted to leave everything in so that you could see how forgiving the Arteza Real Brush pens are. With this first blue that I did, I wasn't happy with it. It just was way too royal blue or way too dark. It wasn't working for me. And at this point, I was way too invested to start over, even though there's another part of the card that I'm not too happy with, but I'll show you how I fix that as I put the card together. Anyway, back to the background. I think that one of the things I did was I didn't work in small enough sections, so I was getting kind of a blotchy look. And I walked away from it and I let it dry completely, because sometimes I have found that if I walk away and come back, I am okay with how the project that I'm working on looks. And that was not the case with this. So what I did to correct the background was I applied a whole lot of clean water on the blue ink and I let it sit for just a moment. And then I blotted it up with a paper towel, and I kept doing that until I felt that I had blotted up enough of the ink. Then I went back in right over the original blue that had been blotted up with a brighter blue. And when I did the background the second time, I applied a lot more ink the first time. Instead of just going down around the edges of the ice cream cones, I just added a lot more ink the first time and then blended it all out with a lot of water, and I was much, much happier with that. To finish up the card, I grabbed a scrap of navy blue cardstock from my stash and treated it with my anti-static powder bag. I stamped the sentiment using Versamark ink, and the sentiment is from Hooray for Everything stamp set by Birch Press Designs. I coated it with detail white embossing powder by Hero Arts, and then heat set it with my heat tool. The Hooray die is from My Favorite Things, and I had die cut it 3 times from white cardstock and stacked it, and then I die cut it once from navy blue cardstock, and when I adhered the white to the navy blue, I kind of offset it a little bit so there would be a tiny navy blue shadow behind that. Next, I adhered the die cut sentiment to a piece of heavyweight vellum, also from My Favorite Things, and to make sure that I didn't have glue squish out all over the sides, I did tap off some of the excess glue onto a piece of scratch paper. Next, I added some foam tape to the heat embossed sentiment, which I had run through my die cut machine with the fishtail banner. The next thing I did was I kind of played with the placement of the vellum and the fishtail tag, because that bottom left-hand corner where I had so much overlap with those two ice cream cones was kind of making me crazy. So this is how I was able to fix that. And having the heavyweight vellum on top of it helped mask it off a little bit, cover it up a little bit, and then with the fishtail sentiment, that covered it up even more. So you could still see part of the ice cream cone on the very bottom, but the vellum and the sentiment tag covered up where it was overlapped pretty badly. So next I used liquid glue to adhere that to a piece of navy blue cardstock that was from my stash, and the panel with the ice cream cones, I trimmed that down to about 4 by 5 1/4, and then the navy blue cardstock is slightly larger than that, but it's slightly smaller than my note card, which is an A2 size top folding white note card. And that finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.